The cold bite of December was supposed to carry the scent of pine and promise, but this year it only delivered the metallic tang of betrayal. For 6 grueling months, Elias Vance had walked the tightrope of academia, not as the heir to the sprawling multi-billion-dollar Vance Industries, the silent, dominant force in global tech education, but as simple Ethan Keller, an unassuming, focused transfer student. His mission was meticulously planned: to audit the operational integrity of the prestigious Sterling University's Computer Science Department before the annual Winter Acquisition Review. Everything was progressing perfectly until the final hurdle: Professor Alistair Thorne's Advanced Algorithms Seminar. Thorne, a man whose ego was as polished and impenetrable as the marble pillars of the university hall, saw Ethan not as a student, but as an annoyance. Ethan, utilizing cutting-edge, unconventional optimization techniques from the industry, repeatedly challenged Thorne's outdated, dogmatic methodologies. Thorne never tolerated dissent, especially when it came wrapped in competence. The seminar became a battlefield of suppressed tension, a quiet power struggle that was about to detonate right before the most celebrated day of the academic year, the annual Sterling University Christmas Gala, the very event where Vance Industries' annual grant renewal was traditionally announced. The final grades were posted at 11:59 p.m. on the last day of classes before the break. While the campus glittered with hastily strung Christmas lights and the air buzzed with the anticipation of travel and family reunions, a single devastating email landed in Ethan's inbox: Grade F. Thorne's accompanying note was dripping with condescension. Your understanding of foundational concepts is catastrophically lacking, Mr. Keller. Perhaps a lesser institution would accept your unconventional innovations, but here at Sterling, we demand mastery. Your failure to grasp the fundamentals ensures you will never be prepared for the caliber of work Vance Industries requires. Enjoy your holiday break. Mine, I assure you, will be much more restful, knowing I upheld the standards of this fine institution. The message was not just a failing grade, it was a public execution. The Dean's List was announced simultaneously, and the absence of Ethan's name, a student previously ranked top of his cohort, was immediately noticed by his peers and, more importantly, by Thorne's favored, sycophantic students. Thorne hadn't just failed him. He had publicly humiliated the idea of him. He had taken Ethan's dedication, his future career trajectory as a perceived entry-level technician, and dismissed it as worthless just days before Christmas. The festive cheer outside the window felt like a cruel mockery. But Professor Thorne had made a fundamental error. He had mistaken a disguised lamb for a true pauper. Ethan Keller had no family obligations awaiting him. His only appointment was the midnight flight to Geneva to present his departmental audit findings to the Vance Board of Directors. And the F that Thorne had so smugly assigned had just provided Ethan with the final damning piece of evidence he needed: proof of academic bias and professional incompetence driven by petty jealousy. The audit had initially focused on fiscal mismanagement and antiquated curriculum. Now, the focus shifted entirely to the human element of inversion of justice. For the next 48 hours, while Sterling University emptied out and the first flakes of a major Christmas Eve snowstorm began to fall, Ethan did not sleep. He sat in his sparse, off-campus apartment, a conscious choice to maintain his disguise, and began to weave the threads of Thorne's professional history into a devastating tapestry of professional deceit. He accessed the Vance archives, cross-referenced internal databases with university records, and pulled old, forgotten emails. The more he dug, the clearer the pattern became. Thorne's celebrated career was built on a series of intellectual thefts and academic shams. The centerpiece of his planned seasonal revenge was a decade-old, highly publicized research paper on distributed network architecture. Thorne had claimed sole authorship, the paper that had effectively secured his tenure at Sterling. But Ethan, utilizing Vance's proprietary AI text analysis tool, discovered an uncanny linguistic and technical correlation between Thorne's paper and a thesis submitted 5 years earlier at a rival institution by a promising but ultimately vanished graduate student named Daniel Hayes. Daniel Hayes had failed his defense, left academia in disgrace, and was never heard from again. Thorne's note about upholding the standards echoed with sickening hypocrisy, setting the stage for the New Year's reckoning. The Christmas Gala, set for New Year's Eve, was Sterling's most important social event, a public relations spectacle where major donors mingled with faculty and where the dean, Dr. Eleanor Varden, delivered her State of the University address. It was Thorne's moment of triumph. He was slated to receive the Faculty Excellence Award. The scene was set for maximum public impact. Ethan knew his true identity was the dynamite, but Thorne's past was the detonator. Humiliation was not enough. The justice needed to be total, irreversible, and perfectly timed to ruin not just Thorne's career, but his entire holiday season. Ethan finalized the audit report, printed the compiled evidence, and placed it into a sleek, unmarked leather briefcase. The season of goodwill was over. The season of reckoning had begun. He then penned a single anonymous email to Dean Varden, requesting an emergency, confidential meeting on the 27th, claiming to possess critical information regarding academic misconduct and the integrity of the upcoming Vance grant. The trap was sprung. The days between Christmas and the New Year were meant for quiet reflection, for the soft, hazy aftermath of celebration. But within the gilded halls of Sterling University, they became a tense, silent prelude to chaos. Dean Varden, a woman accustomed to the delicate dance of academic politics, found her post-Christmas calm shattered by Ethan's anonymous, carefully worded email. The mention of Vance grant integrity was the precise, high-pressure point that guaranteed her attention. The Vance family's patronage was the lifeblood of Sterling's tech reputation. Any threat to that was an existential crisis. Ethan, now operating as Elias Vance in his temporary Geneva command center, utilized the full resources of his family's organization to ensure his plan for seasonal revenge was flawlessly executed. He knew the theatricality of the climax depended entirely on the suffering and arrogance of the antagonist in the preceding act. Thorne needed to be given enough rope to hang himself on the New Year's Eve stage. Elias's team subtly disseminated rumors among the faculty grapevine. A major internal audit was underway, focused specifically on tenure eligibility criteria and the ethical sources of research papers within the computer science department. The murmurs were designed to reach Thorne, feeding his immense paranoia and amplifying his natural defensiveness. Thorne, enjoying his self-declared victory over the impertinent undergraduate, spent the Christmas week basking in the admiration of his favored students and preparing his acceptance speech for the Faculty Excellence Award. He dismissed the rumors as standard academic hysteria. He was protected by his tenure and, crucially, by the conviction that his transgression, the appropriation of Daniel Hayes's work, was too old and too perfectly concealed to ever be unearthed by a mere student, especially one he had just academically assassinated. His arrogance was the perfect fuel for Elias's strategy. He believed his power was absolute. He believed Ethan Keller was powerless. On December 27th, the dean's confidential meeting with a representative of the auditing body took place. Elias, utilizing an encrypted, untraceable line, presented his findings not as an emotional appeal, but as a clinical financial risk report. He didn't initially reveal the source of the failed final paper, his own, but focused instead on the paper that secured Thorne's tenure. The evidence was irrefutable. A comparative analysis of Daniel Hayes's draft thesis, cross-referenced with internal university timestamp logs from a decade ago, showing that Thorne had accessed and downloaded the file moments before Hayes's defense failed. The linguistic fingerprint was identical. the only difference being the absence of Hayes's name and the addition of Thorne's polished introduction. Dean Varden, seeing the meticulous detail and undeniable weight of the evidence, was visibly shaken. She understood the catastrophic implications. Academic fraud of this magnitude could not only revoke Thorne's tenure and his award, but could also jeopardize the Vance grant by proving the university's due diligence had failed spectacularly. Elias, maintaining his professional, detached tone, made his demand precise. The audit team recommends a full, transparent review of Professor Thorne's academic record. To preserve the integrity of the institution and the upcoming grant announcement, we suggest this investigation commences immediately, but the findings remain strictly confidential until the official grant renewal on New Year's Eve. Any attempt to notify Professor Thorne prematurely will be viewed as obstruction of the audit and will result in the immediate and permanent withdrawal of all Vance funding. This created the perfect pressure cooker. Varden was forced to maintain the illusion of business as usual, allowing Thorne to continue his celebration plans while the sword of Damocles hung directly over his head. She was trapped between the fear of a massive academic scandal and the terror of losing the Vance funding. This manufactured delay was the essence of the humiliation waiting to happen. The final act of escalation occurred on December 30th. Professor Thorne, feeling emboldened and untouchable, sent a campus-wide email to all students using the pretext of holiday best wishes. He intentionally singled out his F grade to Ethan Keller, using it as a cautionary tale. Remember, true success requires relentless adherence to rigorous standards. Not everyone has the mettle for this department. Learn from the failures of others, lest you find yourselves out in the cold. The email's cruelty, arriving just before the New Year's celebrations, was a calculated public taunt designed to cement his authority and fully humiliate the perceived victim one last time. The email was the final piece Elias needed. It demonstrated not just academic bias, but malicious intent, confirming that the failure was personal and punitive, not pedagogical. Elias, watching the spectacle from Geneva, smiled for the first time since the failed grade. Thorne had just provided the emotional justification for the extreme public spectacle Elias had planned. The stage was set, the Sterling University New Year's Eve Gala, packed with the academic elite, Vance representatives, and the media. Thorne, the recipient of the Faculty Excellence Award, would walk into the room a king, only to be stripped bare in front of his entire kingdom. The inversion of power was not just imminent, it was locked in for a midnight strike. The clock was ticking down to the final, most devastating humiliation. The Sterling University New Year's Eve Gala was the zenith of the academic social calendar. The grand ballroom, dripping with silver and white decorations, felt less like a celebration and more like a chamber of judgment. Dean Varden, knowing the explosive nature of the audit findings hidden in her safe, moved through the crowd with the strained smile of a condemned woman. Professor Thorne, however, was radiant. Clad in a custom tuxedo, he was the star of the night, holding court with trustees and basking in the pre-award praise. He viewed the sparkling room as confirmation of his status, his tenure, and his utter professional invincibility. His earlier email had delivered the final satisfying psychological blow to that troublesome student, Ethan Keller, and now he was untouchable. The culmination of the evening was set for 11:45 p.m., moments before the midnight countdown. Thorne's acceptance of the Faculty Excellence Award, followed by the dean's announcement regarding the Vance grant renewal. The room was heavy with anticipation, the media cameras primed, and the tension of the incoming new year mingling with the professional rivalry simmering beneath the surface. At 11:40 p.m., just as Dean Varden stepped onto the stage, a sudden, sharp hush fell over the room. The main doors swung open and a figure entered. This was not Ethan Keller, the transfer student in frayed tweed. This was Elias Vance, impeccably dressed, possessing an undeniable aura of inherited authority and flanked by two stern, silent security personnel. The transformation was complete. The meek student was gone, replaced by the predator. He moved with a focused, surgical intent toward the stage. Dean Varden's face drained of all color as she recognized the true identity of her anonymous auditor. She knew the game was over. Thorne, still smiling smugly, saw only an interruption. "Security!" he hissed, attempting to assert his dominance. "Remove this man. This is a private event." Elias stopped directly at the foot of the stage, his gaze locking onto Thorne with the cold finality of an executioner. The ballroom lights seemed to intensify the deep, unflinching anger in his eyes. This was the moment of inversion of power, the ultimate coup de grace. "Professor Thorne," Elias's voice resonated clearly through the professional audio system, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "You are correct. This is a private event. A private event for Sterling University, donors, faculty, and stakeholders. As the chairman of the Vance Industries Board and the individual responsible for the annual grant, and indeed for the majority of the computer science department's operational budget, I believe my presence is mandatory." The gasp that swept through the room was deafening. Thorne's carefully constructed facade shattered. His eyes widened in horrified recognition. The student he had dismissed and humiliated days before Christmas was, in fact, the heir to the entire Vance empire. The man he had deliberately failed was the very person who held the financial fate of the university in his hands. The Herdera disfarçada was revealed. Elias did not allow him a moment to recover. He reached into his tuxedo and produced a sleek USB drive. "Before we celebrate Professor Thorne's faculty excellence, let us first address the matter of academic excellence and integrity." He plugged the drive into the presentation terminal. On the massive screens intended to display Thorne's award biography, a split screen appeared. On the left, the exact text of Thorne's tenure-securing paper. On the right, the identical text of Daniel Hayes's draft thesis, dated 5 years prior. The comparison was stark, undeniable proof of plagiarism. "Professor Thorne failed me before Christmas break," Elias stated, his voice low and dangerous, drawing the crowd into the intimate cruelty of the act. "He failed me," Ethan Keller, the disguised auditor, "for utilizing cutting-edge methodology. He failed me with a personal, venomous note designed for public humiliation, while preparing to accept an award for a paper he stole. A paper that drove a young, brilliant academic named Daniel Hayes out of this institution in disgrace a decade ago. Professor Thorne, you upheld no standards but your own greed and insecurity." The room erupted into shocked chatter. Thorne, o traidor desmascarado, staggered backward, grabbing the podium for support. "And my final grade?" Elias continued, pulling out a printed copy of Thorne's condescending email, projecting it onto the screen for the entire faculty and press to read. "Professor Thorne claimed I lacked the mettle. I countered by giving Dean Varden and the Board of Trustees a gift for the new year: irrefutable evidence of academic fraud, intellectual theft, and malicious professional conduct designed to destroy a student's career simply because he dared to be better than his professor." Elias Vance turned to the dean, cutting off Thorne's stammering protests. "Dean Varden, the Vance grant will be renewed. On one condition: Professor Alistair Thorne is to be stripped of his tenure, his award, and his employment, effective immediately. Furthermore, a full public apology must be issued to the memory of Daniel Hayes. This New Year's Sterling University must choose between upholding a lie or upholding true excellence." As the dean nodded, defeated and complicit, the clock struck midnight. The sound of the New Year's chimes was drowned out by the flashing of cameras and the stunned silence of the crowd watching Thorne, stripped bare of his dignity, being quietly escorted out by security. A vittima triumphante, Elias Vance, stood on the stage. The man who was supposed to be weeping over a failed grade, now controlling the entire institution's future. The seasonal revenge was complete. The humiliating F grade transformed into the tool of Thorne's total professional and public destruction, all before the first minute of the new year.